It was a Saturday night in the foothills above Tucson, Arizona. An 84-year-old woman was dropped off at her home by a family member just before 10 o'clock. By sunrise, she was gone. No phone, no medication she needed every single day to keep her heart working properly. And in her house, investigators would later find something that turned a missing persons case into a criminal investigation. Blood. This is the story of what happened to Nancy Guthrie, and what we still don't know, 5 months later. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel covers ongoing criminal cases with a focus on verified facts and responsible reporting, not speculation dressed up as certainty. If that's your kind of true crime, hit subscribe and tap that like button, because it genuinely helps this kind of careful reporting reach more people. Okay, let's get into it. So who was Nancy Guthrie? Born Nancy Ellen Long in January of 1942, she moved to the Tucson area with her family in the early 1970s and lived there for more than 5 decades. She was widowed in 1988 after her husband Charles died during a mining exploration trip in Mexico. She raised 3 children, Cameron, Annie, and Savannah, and by all accounts remained fiercely independent well into her 80s. She lived alone in the Catalina foothills, was a regular churchgoer, and stayed active in her community. But she was also, in the FBI's own words, a vulnerable adult. At 84, she had limited mobility, a pacemaker, and needed daily medication for a chronic heart condition. That detail matters, and we'll come back to it. You may also recognize her daughter's name, Savannah Guthrie, longtime co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. That connection is a big part of why this case exploded into national headlines. But we're not here for the celebrity angle. We're here for Nancy. Now let's walk through the timeline, because the order of events matters in a case like this. On the evening of Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy's son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, dropped her off at her home in the Catalina foothills at around 9:50 p.m. That is the last confirmed sighting of her. Sometime in the early morning hours of February 1st, she vanished, without her phone, and without the medication she depended on every day. That absence is one of the most chilling details in the entire case, because it suggests she either left in a hurry, was not given the chance to gather her things, or didn't leave under her own power at all. Local, state, and federal authorities responded quickly. The Pima County Sheriff's Department deployed search and rescue teams, police dogs, drones, aerial resources, with help from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Days passed with no sign of her. Then, on February 2nd, authorities announced a turning point. This was no longer a search and rescue operation. It was now a criminal investigation. Sheriff Chris Nanos explained that evidence recovered from Nancy's home indicated a crime had taken place inside the house itself. Homicide investigators were brought in. Bloodstains found at the scene were later confirmed to be Nancy's. Sheriff Nanos put it plainly, saying investigators believed she had been taken from her home against her will, possibly in the middle of the night. Then came the ransom notes. Multiple notes surfaced, demanding payment in cryptocurrency, with 2 separate deadlines that had already passed by February 9th. The first note reportedly demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin. A second note, according to sources cited by CNN, CBS News, and ABC News, made a far darker claim, that Nancy had died shortly after being taken. We want to be very careful here, because this is exactly the kind of detail that gets treated as fact online when it absolutely should not be. These notes were, from the very beginning, of undetermined origin. Nobody, one speed, slow, undetermined. Not the FBI, not the Sheriff's Department. Speed, slow, undetermined. Confirmed they came from an actual kidnapper. On February 10th, the FBI released still images and a short video captured on a doorbell camera. It showed a masked, armed individual carrying a backpack, tampering with the camera on Nancy's property before her disappearance. It remains one of the only pieces of visual evidence connected to that night. The following day, February 11th, a person was detained for questioning in connection with the case. Authorities conducted a court-authorized search in Rio Rico, Arizona. That person was later released without charges. On February 14th, investigators searched a second home near Nancy's residence in Tucson, Speed Slow Carp. again. No arrests followed. On February 24th, with no answers and no sign of Nancy, her family offered a $1 million reward for information leading to her safe recovery. That reward has since grown to $1.2 million. If this kind of methodical, fact-based breakdown is useful to you, this is a great moment to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who follows this case. It genuinely helps. Now, back to the investigation. Let's talk about why those fake ransom notes matter so much, because this is one of the most important threads in the entire case. In July, the FBI's Phoenix office confirmed that some of the notes sent to media outlets were determined to be extortion attempts with no legitimacy, speed, while others were still being evaluated as potentially real. This directly contradicted an earlier report, citing an unnamed FBI official, that claimed all 3 kidnapping-related messages had been ruled completely fake. The Bureau pushed back on that report specifically. As of their most recent public statement, this case is still being investigated as a kidnapping for ransom. Determination. Some notes discounted, others not yet ruled out. And there's a real consequence to this. In one of the clearest developments in the entire case, a California man named Derek Kallela pleaded guilty to federal charges for sending a false ransom note tied to Nancy's disappearance. Specifically, sending a ransom demand across state lines and using a telecommunications device to threaten or harass. He's set to be sentenced in September and faces 5 years of probation. Prosecutors noted he had tested positive for drugs at the time of his plea. This matters because it shows something disturbing but real in high-profile cases like this one. When a disappearance becomes national news, it can attract opportunists who exploit a grieving family's desperation for their own reasons, whether for money, attention, or something else entirely. Every false note the FBI has to run down is a note that pulls resources away from finding the real answers, and it's another wave of false hope, or false grief, inflicted on a family already in agony. So what do we actually know, and what don't we? Here's what's confirmed. Nancy Guthrie was last seen alive on January 31st. She disappeared sometime that night or in the early hours of February 1st, without her phone or her medication. Blood confirmed to be hers was found inside her home. The FBI has doorbell footage of a masked, armed individual on her property. The case is being actively investigated as a kidnapping. Multiple ransom notes were sent. At least one person has pleaded guilty to sending a fake one, and other notes remain under evaluation. The FBI has said it's analyzing mixed DNA recovered from the home. One person was detained and released without charges. No arrests have been made. Here's what remains unknown, and this is important. We do not know who abducted Nancy Guthrie, if that is in fact what happened. We do not know her current whereabouts or condition. We do not know whether the note claiming she died shortly after being taken reflects any truth at all, or whether it was, like others, a cruel fabrication. And we do not know who the masked individual on that doorbell camera actually is. You may see rumors online, including one that circulated in June, claiming an anonymous tip led volunteers to search for her remains in Mexico. That search happened, but it did not produce confirmation of anything, and it should be treated exactly as what it was, an unverified lead, not a fact. This case has held the country's attention for months now, and it's worth understanding why. Part of it is Nancy's connection to Savannah Guthrie, whose public anguish has been raw and constant. She's spoken about it on air, on social media, pleading for anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward, and stressing that any tip can remain anonymous. She stepped away from her broadcasting duties, including coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, to be with her family during the search. But beyond the celebrity connection, this case has resonated because of what it represents to so many people. An independent, elderly woman, living safely in her own home for decades, vanishing without a trace in the middle of the night. It taps into a fear that's deeply human, that even in the place you feel safest, something can go terribly wrong. Before we wrap up, seriously, if you've made it this far, you clearly care about how this story gets told. Subscribing and sharing this video costs nothing, but it tells platforms that thoughtful, fact-checked true crime deserves to be seen over sensationalized speculation. So please, take a second to do that now. Let's bring it all together. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old grandmother, vanished from her Tucson home overnight on January 31st into February 1st, 2026, without her phone or essential medication. Blood confirmed to be hers was recovered from the scene. Multiple ransom notes followed, some now confirmed fake, at least one resulting in a federal guilty plea, others still under FBI review. A masked figure was caught on a doorbell camera near her home before she vanished. Investigators have searched multiple properties, followed thousands of tips, and analyzed DNA evidence. But as of this recording, no arrests have been made, and Nancy has not been found. This investigation is ongoing. Anyone with information is urged to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip online at tips-.fbi.gov. The reward for information leading to her safe recovery currently stands at $1.2 million. If you have thoughts on this case, I'd genuinely love to hear them in the comments below. But please, keep it respectful. This is a real family, still living through the worst moments of their lives in public, and there is a real person named Nancy who is still missing. Avoid naming or accusing anyone who hasn't been charged with a crime. Speculation is fine when it's clearly labeled as speculation, but let's not turn someone's tragedy into a guessing game at their expense. If you want to be notified the moment there's a major update in this case, subscribe and turn on notifications. And if this video helped you understand the facts more clearly, please share it. It really does make a difference. Thank you for watching, and let's hope Nancy Guthrie comes home.